Hello, everyone. How are you all doing? Thank you so much for being here today. I'm here with Medelin, who is my RfRx co-host, and I am Amaia Perez. I'm the online programming director and also your co-host today. So, Medelin, do you want to start reading the first poll whilst I pull it up?
Yes, so we'll have two polls, one at the beginning and one at the end of the call. And I'll go ahead and read the questions for anyone that's only listening in. And there's three of them. When you think of Judaism, specifically Jewish people in current times, what image or idea or association comes to mind? The Orthodox Jews depicted in the movies, men with the side curls and women with the scarves, or secular Jews, Hollywood actors, famous Jewish comedians? Or do you know very little about Judaism, or you don't think you ever met a Jewish person in your life? Or lastly, you have some familiarity with Judaism and its different sects. The second question is, if you grew up religious, did your religion view Judaism as the wrong one or as the fellow God-fearing religion? And your options are either the wrong one, a fellow God-fearing religion, you grew up in Judaism, or you did not grow up religious. And lastly, would your family feel more threatened if you converted to another religion or if you became an atheist? Your options are converting to another religion is considered worse, atheist or lack of belief entirely in a God is worse, they're both equally terrible, or you didn't grow up religious. And those are your options. They'll remain up on the screen. Before I pass it back to Amaia, I want to give a shout out to the ACD, the Atheist Community of Discord. They're always streaming our videos on Discord, and the link to their Discord channel will be in the chat. Back to you, Amaia.
Cool. Thank you so much, Medelin. So, as usual, I'm just going to tell you guys about what it is that we do in RfRx and also in RfR in general. So basically, if you are new here, in RfRx, we do weekly online sessions where we bring in guests to discuss different topics that are relevant to anyone who is either in the process of leaving religion or has already left religion or is just interested in any of these topics. So this is just a way of providing good advice and coping skills to anyone who needs them right now. If you have any sort of questions, any feedback, any guest suggestions, any topic suggestions, you can send us an email to rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org, which is linked in the chat. And also, by the way, all the links we mentioned will be in the chat. And if you're watching this on YouTube, everything will be linked down below in the description box. And then in RfR in general, so in Recovering from Religion, we have a mission statement. And that mission statement is that we offer hope, healing, and support to those who are struggling with issues of religion and non-belief. So firstly, how we offer hope? So the way we offer hope is by sharing and listening to personal stories. So it's this idea that if I can get through something, then so can you. So if I have, gone through a specific struggle and I share it, then it will encourage you to be able to deal with it better. And in order to do this, we have a blog and also we have a podcast. So if you feel like this is something that could help, go for them because they're amazing. Part 2 of the RfR mission statement is that we offer healing. And the way we offer healing is via our helpline. And this is done via either chat or telephone call. So we have a phone number that you can call, and then you can just chat with our agent. Now, this is a 24/7 support system. It's completely confidential and safe. And our trained agents will listen to you with an empathetic ear and no judgment or criticism. So you feel like you could really use just talking to someone. This is a really, really great resource because they are trained to listen to you and to just be understanding of any issues that you may have. So yeah, there is that for healing. And we also have a resource page. And this is basically like a list of different articles, books, videos, podcasts, all sorts of different formats, resources that you can imagine. You will find them in our resource page, which Todd has, again, very kindly linked in the chat. Thank you, Todd. So yeah, that's it for healing. Now, Medelin, do you want to talk about support, please?
Yes, and for support, we'll talk about peer support groups and the Secular Therapy Project. The peer support groups are face-to-face in-person meetings, typically pre-COVID. Right now, we're doing all virtual meetings. And for the in-person ones, we have over 50 groups around the world, and we're always looking to form even more. We may be coming back to them, ideally in a foreseeable future. And so please reach out You can find the nearest one on our meetup site. That link will be posted in the chat. And regarding the Secular Therapy Project, this is to help you connect with a licensed secular mental health care provider. So these are carefully screened for the following criteria: appropriate licensing in their state or country, maintaining a secular practice so they won't proselytize, and exclusive use of evidence-based treatments. They can be found at the seculartherapy.org website.
And then we also have something called the online community. So the online community is basically an online platform, as its name kind of says, where you can chat with and meet people that share similar backgrounds as you. So, for example, if you are an ex-Muslim who is looking to connect with other fellow Muslims, then we also have a group for you. If you're someone that has a family and wants to connect with other people that has families, we also have a group for you. So essentially, the message is that whatever group you belong to, I'm sure we find a place for you there. So if you could really use this talking to people that share the similar experiences as you do, make sure you contact one of our helpline agents because they will let you know how to join one of our online community groups. And then before we jump into the structure of the session, I just wanted to let you guys all know a bit about volunteering because RfR is a charity that runs exclusively by volunteers. All of us are volunteers here. But yeah, I just want to say that being a volunteer has been such an amazing thing in my life. It has been something that has really improved my mental health. It has kept me distracted during quarantine. It has made me connect with a lot of people, meet so many different people, and just develop my skills in areas that I didn't expect to develop them in. I never thought I would be having an online show with a stupid amount of people watching. So that's a plus. That could happen to you. You know, you never know where this volunteering journey will take you. So if you feel like you have some time to spare, I highly encourage you to join us in the volunteering group. We're always looking for volunteers, and we have so many different roles. You could be a researcher, you could be a helpline agent, you could be a support group leader, you could be so many different options. And now that the half of the intro is done, Medelin, do you want to tell us about the meeting format, please?
Yes, we'll have roughly 1 hour discussion here with Libby. And following that, there will be a question and answer section, roughly 20 to 30 minutes. We'll be asking the questions that we'd like for you to add on the chat, please. And after that, the mute can come off, the recording stops, and that's the hangout session where we stay on for quite a while sometimes.
Cool. So now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our amazing speaker today. So we have Libby Pollak today, and I'm just going to tell you a bit about her before she starts doing her amazing usual speech interview kind of thing. So for those of you who don't know them, Libby Pollak was born and raised in an ultra-Orthodox Hasidic community in Brooklyn, New York. Cannot pronounce Brooklyn at all, I do apologize. She attended an all-girls religious school where secular education was frowned upon, and students were taught mostly Bible studies and how to be a good, obedient wife. So, Libby, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so privileged that you're here. We love that you took the time to come here today, so thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be here.
I guess the first question that comes to mind is, what is your coming out story? So, your personal experience with it.
Okay, so my coming out story, I didn't have one epiphany or one flashing moment. It didn't happen overnight. There were bits and pieces, incidences throughout my life, a combination of thoughts, things we were taught that didn't add up, and then life experiences that made me think, that made me question if I'm living life by default or if this is the lifestyle I want to have. So if I have to break it down to a few points, I would say a big part of it was the fact that, in general, the way we were raised, everything was forbidden and prohibited, and the constant theme was modesty and hiding and following the rules. That applies to everyone in the religion, Hasidic Judaism, which is a very ultra-Orthodox sect. But especially women were always told to hide. Their voices are not meant to be heard. Their faces are not meant to be seen. They have to hover in the background and serve the men. It's always about serving the men so that the men could be the crown. So I always felt a little bit repressed. But the highlight was when I was in an arranged marriage, and that marriage was very traumatic, and then getting out of it was a nightmare. So according to ultra-Orthodox Jewish law, only the man is allowed to grant the woman, the husband has to give the wife the divorce. The wife cannot just obtain it otherwise. And if he refuses to give her that divorce or that get, which is the Hebrew term for that, she is basically screwed, and she's dependent on him. And there's a term for it called an aguna, the way we pronounce it, agina, which means chained. The woman is chained, and that happened to me. He refused to give the get, and he said, "I don't care." On top of that, he also wanted money for that. So, like, oh, if you do want the get, it was like a ransom. I want this and that amount of cash from you. So I was in this limbo situation for almost a year, and I was 20 years old when I had endured this. Now, at the time, I was still in the bubble, and I still wanted to stay religious. I didn't allow myself to think that deeply and to question. I knew I was in survival mode. I wanted to be free from this guy and to be able to move on and get married again to somebody else, but just to get out of that situation. I didn't think that deeply about religion. So that was my ultimate goal. And afterwards, after we had to negotiate the money and the whole thing, after a year, I finally got that get. But afterwards, it started hitting me. Why would I want to be a part of a religion that doesn't give a woman the basic right to exist, that does not care if a woman is chained forever? And by the way, if it goes the reverse way, which means the woman doesn't want to accept the get, technically she has to accept it as well. The man does have a loophole, and he could get, as long as he gets signatures from 100 rabbis, he is allowed to marry another woman, even though polygamy is not nowadays allowed, but he will get that special permission. So there's a loophole for a man, but not for a woman. So then it struck me, why would I even want to be a part of this religion that they wouldn't have cared if my whole life withered away? And also they're all about everyone should get married, and they'll raise funds and charity for if let's say there's a poor couple that doesn't have money to get married, and that's where they're very generous. But if somebody needs money to get divorced, nobody cares. You're on your own completely. So that was one very big incident in my life that made me question. And then also I went on a birthright trip, and I started just mingling more with outsiders, and I started realizing, first of all, there are other Jews that are not as religious as the way I was raised to be. So maybe their Judaism is the right Judaism. And then as I progressed and allowed myself to think, I started thinking, who says Judaism is the answer at all? Maybe it's another religion, maybe no religion. So it went in steps, but I would say that was the most personal reason as to why I felt that I was fed up. And that's why I also chose to speak about being a woman, because that's such a big part of my personal story, being religious as a woman.
Yeah, I feel like that really relates to when we had Jasmine Mohammed. You mentioned that in the birth meeting. I feel like you're right, your stories are quite similar, because she was also got into like this arranged marriage that she was unhappy in. And it always surprises me how like different religions have that one common thing where like females get married to random men and they have like no say in it. So I'm wondering, is there any circumstance where the women do have a choice? Is there any way where they ask them at all, or is that just like an exception more than a rule?
You know, it's good that you're asking, because many apologetics always say, oh, nobody forces you, you do have a choice, nobody stands there with a gun and forces you. But the way it works, first of all, men and women are segregated their entire lives practically. Sometimes the first time you even speak to a man that is not your relative will be at this thing called a basho, which is basically the date when the man and the woman meet. They're at someone's dining room table, relatives are hovering in the nearby room, sometimes they're already baking cake, preparing for the engagement ceremony. The stress and the pressure is so strong, and they're also incredibly young. They start at 17, 18, 19. So the average age is 18, 19, so up or down a year. So they're super young. They barely know what their own name is. They don't know what a man is like. They don't know how relationships work. They're there in that setting. The whole family is already all hyped up. The future mother-in-law already bought a diamond bracelet, and the pressure is so immense. And what do you know about what you want or what you like? And you're groomed your whole life to just, let's say, for a woman to be a wife, and it goes both ways. Actually, the men don't have much of a say either. I think everyone is a victim in this arranged marriage system, and most people just end up saying yes at the first meeting. Sometimes they have a second meeting, and that's usually the first person that they met, unless there's rare exceptions. For example, if you find out that there are some major problems in a family, for example, some people have mental illness, which is considered a stigma. For them, it's a major problem. Then sometimes they'll say no. But in general, that's how it is. Perhaps if somebody has a second marriage, they have a bit more of a choice. Or there's occasionally you have what they call the rebels, the people that they meet people on their own, but that's very, very rare, and it's considered extremely scandalous. So in general, people don't have a say. They're not forced. There's no gun to their head, but they're practically coerced into it, because the pressure of not embarrassing the other person or not disappointing the family is very, very strong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. That is coherent to, I think, what I was expecting to. Like, you don't need to be forced literally at gunpoint for you to feel like you have to do it anyway. It's not forced, but it is socially reinforced in a way where you may be led into the belief that you will go to hell if you don't get married to this person or practice certain traditions or whatever. And especially in the context of like arranged marriages, I feel like that's so awful, because as Libby said, this happens when people are so young. Like when you're 17, you don't know. I feel like you just don't know about relationships as much as when you're older. You haven't fully developed your personality, your identity, your sense of what you want to do with your life. Or at least I know I didn't when I was 17. So yeah, I mean, that's just awful. My next question for you was, what sort of beliefs sets Orthodox Judaism apart from other religions that we should be aware of? I know that's like a very broad question, but just like in a nutshell.
In terms of beliefs, yeah, I think most religions believe that theirs is the one and only, and the only right one. Especially Judaism was one of the first ones. So, I mean, it has been preceded by other forms of religions, but from the well-known ones. I would say there's definitely very strong elitist superiority complex going on, that we're the chosen and we're more special than others, and other people's lives don't matter as much as ours, the way I was raised. As well as, well, in terms of, I'm not sure about beliefs that much, I have to think about that, but in terms of lifestyle, I would say, especially the sect that I grew up in, they're very, very, very insular. First of all, Yiddish is my first language. In case anyone detected the accent, it's always the question, where's your accent from? Where are you from? I'm from New York, but I speak Yiddish as a first language. That is what most people speak in the Hasidic communities. So that's one way they stay very separated from everybody else. They have their own newspapers where they could get away with writing whatever. Aside from that, education. So I've met very religious people, religious Christians and Muslims, but most of the time they did have access to a regular education, at least public school standard, maybe private school. The way we and the schools that we attended were not even, they're not even accredited. Like, I didn't have an accredited diploma when I graduated from high school. They teach us mostly, as mentioned at the beginning, Bible studies and irrelevant, a lot of laws of what we're not allowed to do on the Sabbath, and what we're not allowed to eat, and the different blessings we make on different foods. So many hours are wasted on that unnecessary stuff. So I would say education is a key aspect of how we differ from other religions. I'm trying to think of other, I think the segregation as well, the extreme segregation, also where men are not allowed to be even friends with women and not allowed to talk to them. That's what comes to mind right now.
So you mentioned briefly about like how education is so different from like what you would get in a secular high school. I'm not sure if, I mean, you may not remember, but to what point of secular education do you get when you are in a Judaistic Orthodox religious upbringing, let's say? Like how much of a secular upbringing or secular education do you get?
Okay, so in this is one area where actually the women are a little bit better off than the men, because the focus for the men is so much to learn to be scholars in the Bible. So they learn even less. So the typical yeshiva graduate, yeshiva is the term for boys only school where the men study, with adolescent boys and then adolescents until they reach age of getting engaged. So they learn the bare basics. Some of them do not know past basic addition, subtraction. They might not even know multiplication and division. Many of my peers, my ex-Hasidic male friends, barely know how to spell. They all sound like they're dyslexic, even though they're not. The women, okay, they teach us a little bit more, but the very, very basic. So anything science related, anything that has to do with even hinting to evolution or how the world evolved, so other science, reproduction, anything sexual, anything heretical, is a no-no. No secular literature, no Shakespeare, no advanced math or science. I had to be self-taught. When I attempted to go to college, I had to start with a remedial math class because I didn't even know the basic high school math that most students knew. For example, and I considered myself a smart student. I read a lot, so my vocabulary and writing were more advanced. However, everything else was super, super basic. I would say basic elementary level. And yeah, the men learn even less. They don't go past first or second grade. And also, it's not valued. People scoff at it. They always tell us how unimportant all of this is, and we just need to be good wives. So it's instead of some other subjects, they'll teach us. Maybe we had one class that was kind of enjoyable, home economics, which was basically a baking class, and we had a sewing class. I personally appreciated that. I would say that was probably the only class I enjoyed because I'm crafty and I like to sew. But otherwise, not very many practical things. No art, no music, none of that cultural stuff.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and it's just horrible. I mean, I didn't expect the education level to be so low. I don't know. I feel like it always surprises me when that's legal in a country like the US. I guess that's just the world we live in. So, what is the name of the deity of Orthodox Judaism, and also do you have like a specific holy book? I know you mentioned the Bible, but do you want to just get a bit more deep into that?
Yeah, so our holy book is the Torah. And what was the other question? What the name of our God?
Yeah.
It's in general Hashem. I mean, there are other names, but they're considered too holy, so you're only allowed to say it when you say a blessing. One is Adonai, and it's actually spelled Yehovah, which is like Jehovah, but we just pronounce it Adonai only when you say a blessing, and that's considered terrible to just say it the way I'm saying it now. I should smack my mouth and put some soap in. But the general term, when you just want to refer, you say either Hashem, which means literally the name, or Dir Bashefed in Yiddish means the creator, or one more word, the Eibishter, which means the one above. So either the Eibishter, the Bashefed, or Hashem, variations of that. Then there's a Aramaic one actually that we use sometimes, especially in songs. It's more poetic, and that's Kitshu B'dichi, which means the Holy One, blessed be He.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned songs. Did you also? I mean, I guess you do pray in Orthodox Judaism. Is there any other way to communicate with the deity, or is it just like praise?
It's mostly prayer. They used to tell us stories of these old ladies and sometimes old men too, that were so illiterate, they didn't even know how to pray, but they just mumbled to God. But in general, it's just through prayer. Yeah, mostly. Oh, I just wanted to touch on what you said earlier about that it shouldn't even be legal, this whole education system. And mind you, there is a movement. I have to give this person a shout out. There's this ex-Hasidic activist. His name is Naftali Moster, and he founded this organization called Yafed. And he tries to fight for Hasidim to get a secular education, but it's a fight against City Hall because they're so powerful, the Hasidim, and they feel so threatened by just anything secular and outside that they're constantly resisting it. And there's probably some bribery with the politicians. So it's a constant battle. But I did want to mention that there are people that are trying to change that and do a class action. People have tried doing class action lawsuits against their yeshivas that also they just took their money, and sometimes they took their financial aid. They counted the yeshiva subjects as, for example, college credits. So it's definitely, there are definitely people trying to change that, but so far it's a lost case. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, I had no idea about that. That's awful. I mean, I just don't understand how these things happen. It's like it's so like outrageous, and you could never expect it. As I said, in a country like the US, it's like something that you wouldn't expect to happen, but it does happen, and it's just, it really does affect so many people's lives. Like the trauma that you receive when you get out of religion is just absolutely massive. So the fact that like these people in the higher up positions are like letting this happen is just completely outrageous, in my opinion, anyway. So yeah, I'm so sorry you had to deal with that, because I can't imagine how difficult that must have been. So yeah. So the next question that I had was what sort of different sects there are. So you mentioned like well, I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce that, like the Hadistic world. I'm not sure if that is like a specific sect within Judaism, and if it isn't, then what are different sects?
Yeah, so yeah, that's why I asked the question in the beginning of how familiar people are, and I see some people are commenting in the comment section. There are many different sects of Judaism, and it goes all the way from completely secular reform, like those Hollywood Jews that are not really religious, but they're just Jewish, people that are traditional, people that are culturally Jewish, reform, conservative Jews, Reconstructionists, people that make their own kind of Judaism. I mean, I identify as culturally Jewish currently. I'm not against some of the cultural aspects. I'm just an atheist. And then it goes all the way to more religious. There are the Middle Eastern Jews, have their own tradition. Sephardic Jews versus Ashkenazic Jews. Originally, Sephardic meant from Spain. Sephard is the Hebrew word for Spain, but it's an umbrella term for Jews from the Middle East, even South America sometimes, but they generally originally came from the Middle East or Spain. And then the Ashkenaz means Germany, but it refers to, in general, the Eastern European Jews. There are exceptions, but in general, you could usually tell a little bit by the skin color. Like the paler Jews tend to be Ashkenazic, and the darker skinned Jews are probably Sephardic. In Israel, there's a mix. There's a mix of them because many people came after the Holocaust. So there's that, and then the Sephardic Jews are more into. It's interesting because many of them take the belief very seriously, like their love of Hashem, and they feel more connected to God, but they're not as strict in terms of the lifestyle. You'll see many of them maybe not even wearing the kippah, which is one of the core religious attire, covering the head. But then they'll be very like their belief they're more superstitious, for example, and then it goes on, and then there's modern Orthodox, and then Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox. So Hasidic Judaism, the community that I come from, is the most extreme sect of Orthodox Judaism. And then within Hasidic Judaism, there are also many sects and different Hasidus. So basically, what's a Hasidus? Originally, it meant people that are under the guidance of a rabbi, and the rabbi leads them. And they were supposed to serve God more out of warmth and passion rather than just the the letter of the law. It ended up not being that way, but the original founder of Hasidus, the Baal Shem Tov, Yisroel Baal Shem Tov, he had very different intentions. He was actually a chiller, as they would call him. Allegedly, he smoked some of that stuff and used to get high and would go out and connect with nature. He was kind of a hippie. So that was, if it stayed that way, perhaps some people would be more lighter in spirit. However, it's a long, complicated story how things evolved, and a lot of it has to do with the Holocaust, because after the trauma of the Holocaust, some people took it to the next level and they became a little bit OCD, and they had this mentality of, oh, Hitler tried to eradicate us, so let's show him. We're going to have as many kids as we have, and he tried to get us because of religion, so let's become as extreme as we could get. And the rabbis that were the leaders right after the war, and one of them being right there on top, Rabbi Joel Teitelbaum, who is the Satmar rabbi, and Satmar is the most known sect of Hasidus and the largest sect, at least in the US. I think Ger is the one in Israel. He was an extremist and a fanatic. I could go on and on about this. He was actually very anti-Israel as well. So it's very interesting how their politics evolved. But back to the original question, things nowadays, since the Holocaust, post-war, people became crazy, and they're getting crazier by the year. They keep adding more and more stringencies and rules, and it's just, as the world is secularizing and becoming more open-minded and liberal and Western, they're going that way.
I guess my follow-up question to that is, do people in different sects of Judaism believe that everyone else is wrong, as in they're going to hell and they hate each other, or is there like a complicity because they are all part of Judaism, even if they are part of different sects?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's such a divide amongst different sects. They all think they're better than the other, and they don't mix with each other. They don't marry each other. Even amongst Hasidic people that probably to the general outsider, they all look alike. They won't, for example, I mentioned Satmar. A Satmar Chassid will not marry someone from Belz, and Belz is a Hasidus that is, well, they're based in Israel and they're more pro-Israel, for example. It gets very very technical and detailed, and if you wear the bow on your hat, they wear a special felt hat. If you're from the Hasidus where they wear the bow on the left side, you're not going to marry the person who wears it on the right side. I mean, you have to live there and be immersed to get these nuances. It gets so nuanced and detailed, it's difficult to explain. So although, yeah, they may look alike to outsiders, and sometimes I converse with my fellow ex-Hasidic friends, and to us, we say, oh, it's all the same. It's all the same. At this point, we're so out of it. They're all, if they're religious, they're all in the same category. But it's not really that way. And growing up, it's funny because we wanted to be like those, for example, Chabad Jews. Chabad is the most, I don't know how to pronounce it, proselytizing, the ones that try to, not outsiders, not non-Jews, or as they're called, goyim, but they're always very busy with trying to bring back Jews that are lost, and they'll stop. Maybe, perhaps some of you have been stopped on the street by some of them during holidays asking, are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? And then they try to make you do certain things or make certain blessings. So, but they mingle more with outsiders. They speak English. Some of them go to college. We always thought they were so modern and cool. Or there's another sect of ultra-Orthodox Judaism called Litvish, and they're so extreme as well. But we thought they were modern because the women there do not have to shave their heads after they're married, and Hasidic women do. So we thought, oh, they were so cool. They could have hair. Wow, it's so forbidden. And they're allowed to wear black stockings, and we only had to wear like a certain color of beige, or as I call it, sweet potato, like very particular colors. And so now I'm laughing because at the end of the day, mentally, most of them are just as extreme. But we thought that they were so different, and we were strongly discouraged from mingling with them. And there's definitely a bit of an unspoken either rivalry or elitism going on. But if we're talking about something that happens in the outside world, there's still that Jewish kinship. So for example, I mean, this may sound bad, but let's say you hear that there was an accident, you know, and people will ask, oh, who was it? The first question will be, was it a Jew? And then the next question will be, was it a Heimische Jew, which means a Jew that's, Heimisch means like home, like one of us. It definitely, there's something to it about, oh, you're a Jew, but then you're not the Jew like us.
Yeah. Yeah, that always amazes me also. I feel like I say that with everything, but I feel like it's just there's not that, I mean, I know there's a lot of religious people, but even within like big religions, there's so many different sects, and the fact that you can't marry, as you said, someone from a different sect of the religion is just mind blowing to me. I feel like you have to have such a level of like believing that you're so right, that only you know, you have the whole truth and everyone else has it so wrong. It always amazes me. But yeah, thank you for letting us know, because that's really, really interesting. And I know that there's obviously different sects may have different ways of organizing themselves, but I guess in general, in what way does the religion organize in terms of hierarchy? So I guess, I mean, you don't have like a pope. So who would be at the top? What would be like the pyramid there?
Okay, so in the Hasidic world, it's mostly the rabbis are the leaders. So where are these rabbis coming from? It used to be that in Europe, most of the population was, you know, illiterate and not very educated. So the rabbis were usually at least biblically intelligent, and they were scholars, and they knew how to read, and so it started out that way. Then it ended up becoming like a dynasty, like the royal family, where just, oh, if your father was a rabbi, then you'll take over. And nowadays, it's like that as well. If you were a rabbi before the war in Europe, and everyone has a ton of kids, so at some point when the rabbi of a certain sect dies, usually the oldest son will take over. Sometimes if the older son doesn't want to take that position, another son will take over, and oftentimes they fight about it, and there's heavy politics about it. In fact, in Satmar nowadays, it's two brothers that both didn't want to give up the honors, so it divided. And they used to fight a lot with other Hasidic sects, but they said one good thing that came out of it was that when their father died, they finally started leaving other sects alone. They used to throw eggs on other types of Jews and do prank calls, and they just didn't let other people live in peace. But now they're focused on each other. So yeah, that's pretty much how it works. If your father was a rabbi, you have the chance. Here and there, there's another type of rabbi nowadays, where if a person builds a synagogue and invites people to pray there on Shabbat, on the Sabbath, then there could also be like their own, they could become a rabbi, but it's a different type of rabbi. Their children are not, so they still cannot, their children cannot marry other royal children. It still goes according to the traditional rules or customs of how they decide who's worthy of marrying whom. So that's pretty much a rabbi these days.
I know you mentioned the struggles that females face, like in general, but if you want to just dig a bit deeper into that, and also not only for women, but also for maybe people in the LGBT community, or just any other sort of demographic that may struggle within the religion.
Okay, so there's so much that I could talk about in terms of how women are deprived of certain privileges and how they're considered less than. I mean, for starters, there's a prayer that everyone says every day. The men have it differs a little bit for the men, and the specific blessing that these men say every day that the women don't say is, thank you, God, for not, well, you thank God for a lot of things, for giving me strength, for giving me vision, for allowing me to stand on my 2 feet, and on and on. And thank you for not creating me a woman. That's what the men say. And then the women are supposed to say, oh, thank you for making me however you made me. So, I mean, come on, what does that mean? By the way, one of the prayers is also, thank you for not making me a goy, which means a non-Jew. So that, like, how are we supposed to feel? I have this list of sources actually that I have to pull up here that specify how women are considered less than. So
yeah, I mean, the fact that men have to say thank you for not making me a woman, that's like, come on, how in your face does it need to get? Like, we get it, women are less, like, calm down, you know, like, we understand. I don't know, I know it's horrible, but that sounds quite funny to me. It's like, it almost seems like a joke. Like, you know, if I had to make a parody of a religion, that's something I would definitely add in, you know.
Yeah, so first, so things, yeah, more things that people mentioned today, because I asked my friends, hey, what can you guys add to the conversation in terms of how women are less than? So there are so many things. I'll read just a few. First of all, the whole way a woman is considered unclean after she gets her period, and there's a whole process of what she has to endure for a married woman until she's allowed to be again together with her husband. You have to, I mean, I feel like a creep even repeating these customs, but what they call taharas hamashpacha, which is purity of the family, the woman has to basically there are special rags used for a woman to inspect herself every day for 7 days to make sure she's not bleeding. And now if she has a question and she's not sure if it's blood after her period is over, she has to take either that rag or her underwear to a rabbi, and the rabbi has to determine if this is considered blood, if she's still dirty, or if she is allowed to just continue counting until 7 days of clean days, and then she goes to the mikveh, which is a pool of water, where she has to dip in with a few women looking on, and then she's clean. So yeah, I know this sounds crazy, but that's how it is, and that's considered such a strong part of the religion. If you don't do that, your children are not considered legitimate Jews. So that, first of all, that a rabbi gets to decide when you have to be with someone, when you should, and it's not only when you should not, but when you absolutely should. Like the night that you go to the mikveh, you must be with your husband. And the inspecting underwear, which I don't know who made up these rules. I don't want to know what kind of weird things they were into. That's number one. Another thing, a woman is not allowed to be a witness in court. There are all these phrases saying "noshim dat and kalis," which means a woman's mind is flighty and they're emotional and they're not reliable, and therefore we can't take her word for anything. There's this thing in the Talmud where a woman is considered. Let me read it. A woman is essentially, I'm translating, a woman is essentially a flask full of feces, a reference to the digestive system, and her mouth is full of blood, a euphemistic reference to menstruation. And then it goes on, it says, yet men are not deterred and they run after her with their desires. So that's how women are compared. More things. They can be part of a minyan. A minyan is basically a prayer. You have to have 10 men in order to make the prayer legitimate. A woman cannot be a part, can only be a man. A woman cannot, like I mentioned earlier, cannot give a get. There's a whole long list of what women are not allowed to do. Not allowed to sing. Their voice is considered provocative. So even talking it's better if they stay quiet. They say women were given 9 out of 10 out of their measurements of words, that they talk and talk and talk and blabble, and that they're just full of emotions and they're hysterical and all of that. In general, whenever there's a show or whenever there's a holiday or celebration, it's always the men. For example, there's this one holiday called Simchas Torah, where you dance with the Torah, and the actual scroll that they have in the synagogues, only the men stand and dance with it. The women just have to look through something called a mechitza, which is basically either a curtain or a wooden thing with tiny holes, so that the women could see the men, but the men could not, heaven forbid, see the women, because they could provoke them, and then they can't concentrate in their prayers. Then we have all these verses that are drilled in, that the whole honor of a woman is to stay inside and not to leave the house. there's just endless amounts of this, and also if a woman does decide that she wants to be egalitarian and, for example, do some things that men do, they'll call her all types of names. For example, there's something called tefillin, which is basically leather straps that the men have to put on as part of their attire while they pray, and this supposedly connects them with God. If a woman puts it on, she's considered evil and horrible. And I once did an art shoot where I was wearing it. I thought it looked very artistic. Oh, I got called all types of names. I got slut shamed. I got called words that I've never heard before, just because I'm a woman and I'm not supposed to do the same things as men. I did nothing wrong. If a man would do it, they would be celebrated. So, oh, I'm offensive. I'm just being controversial. I got a lot of hate for that. Versus in an egalitarian Jewish sect, the women are given more. The women are allowed to do the same things as men. They could be rabbis, but not in ultra-Orthodox Judaism. They can't officiate anything at a wedding. There are just so many examples. But in general, you're meant to be a mother. You're meant to be good in the kitchen and bake a good kokosh cake. Kokosh cake is actually a very good cake. It's a Hungarian recipe, but that's all you need to know how to do. Don't get educated. In fact, there was a ban against women going to college. There was actually an article about it in the New York Times, where they wrote about that they have these what we call pashkavilin, which is basically banners that they hang on the posts, and they write every Monday and Thursday there's a new forbidden thing, a new prohibition. Women are not allowed to do this. They're not allowed to wear that. Every tragedy that happens is because the women were wearing very fitted clothes, for example. So then women are blamed for everything that goes wrong, and they're constantly told what they're not allowed to do. And anyway, so the ban was on education, that if a woman goes to college, she won't be allowed to get certain jobs, or won't be allowed to be hired. Now, there are some that do it, very, very few. And again, it's always these apologists saying, oh, you could do it if you want to, but it's extremely difficult to do it, and it's not something that's respected. It's not made easy. In general, your entire purpose in life is to be a good wife and a mother, and your children, they give you your identity. I get told all the time by my family, oh yeah, how can you find meaning in your life? Well, your life is so empty if you don't have a family with kids. Like, it's purposeless. So you're going nowhere. You're going to regret it. They can't even comprehend that people could enjoy anything else in life other than being a mom, or hanging out with their friends and gossiping, and everything revolving around their children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that kind of begs the question of how many females do leave Orthodox Judaism. I mean, there may not even be like a record of how many people leave, but I would expect, because there is so much restrictions on women and so many things that they can do and that they're blamed for, do you feel like there's a higher rate of women leaving religion or men? Because I guess you could also make the argument that men receive more education, so they may be more free to go. They may have more resources, more, I don't know, like more capability of leading, because they just have been brought up differently. So do you have any statistics on that, or any sort of like personal experiences that you have seen around you of who leaves the church more than others?
I don't have statistical, I don't have the statistics, but anecdotally, from what I've seen, it's definitely a very, very low percentage, below 1%. The way the whole community and family structure works is that, okay, you get married at 18, you have a baby at 19 or 20, and you have a few more, and then by the time, it takes away your time to even think. You're so distracted with your kids, you're a kid yourself. By the time you start thinking about things, you're so deeply into it. And of course, even a secular society, it's more expected of women to take care of their children. So in general, a man that wants to leave has more freedom to do so by virtue of the woman being the homemaker and taking care of the kids. And in general, men are given a little bit more freedom, as in many different religions. First of all, women are not allowed to drive. I forgot to mention that. Even Saudi Arabia is more advanced than us because they already allow their women to drive. So if a woman drives, her children will be kicked out of school. So a man is allowed to drive. So that gives you so much freedom. And then there's this whole underground double life situation, which is mostly men, that they go out at night, they go to the bars, they try to pick up ladies and do a little bit of both. And some of them, they're not very intellectual often. They're not specifically non-believers. They just want to taste a little bit of the outside world. So their wives are at home, busy with the kids, and at night they sometimes go out to bars. If you live in New York City, you've probably come across them. They usually they put on a Yankees cap and they put their side curls behind, and they think everyone thinks they're a hipster because they have the beards. But usually after they open their mouths, you could tell either by their accent or by their awkwardness, because they don't really know how to talk to women as humans. Unfortunately, also because of the segregation, a lot of them they have that lifelong creepiness about them. So
yeah, that was actually going to be like my follow-up question, because I've noticed in different religions, and to be fair, in secular society sometimes also, that men are portrayed as these like sexual predators where you just need to run away from them, and they will only want to have sex with you. There is no way that a man will just want to be friends with you, or he may appreciate you as a person. That is never the case. You cannot have male friends. Like I have had conversations with not like super close friends, but like people that I know, because I do have male friends that are just friends. Like it's been very obvious that we're friends, and that's just like something that a lot of people don't understand. So I'm wondering if in Judaism that is also something that happens, that because females are so over-sexualized, it kind of also drags men to this, oh, I'm going to get aroused by anything and I can't have friendships with a woman or any sort of relationship that's not sexual with a woman, apart from your mom, obviously.
So that also, there's this mentality amongst a lot of men that any woman who's not religious anymore is just out there hooking up with anyone and everyone. It's not even about what the woman wants. It's about, oh, I'm interested in you. You must be down for some fun. And it's unfortunate that it's this way, because I try to be compassionate to these men because I know where they're coming from. I know that it's just a lack of education, and I want to say they don't know better, but I mean, you can't just get away with this. Like sometimes they do stuff that they could be arrested for assault or whatever. I've had situations where men just grabbed me and just thought they could touch me. And a lot of women have also had that happen, and there's no excuse for that. I think it's possible to get out of that mentality, but you have to be very educated and leave your little bubble of only hanging out with, let's say, other ex-Hasidim or other on the fringe people. I think it's important to really be out there and make an effort to educate yourself. And even then, sometimes there are still remnants. I don't want to put them all under one category, but it's a common phenomenon that I've encountered repeatedly. Unfortunately, it's just, there's something about it that they just assume that either every woman that has left, like me, or every non-Jewish woman is just, it's just all about sex and partying, and the failure to view them, to realize that they're a human being first. And I don't know if in general, if men and women could be friends. I mean, that's an argument that a lot of people often have. I think it's possible, but I think the odds are lower when you're coming from a background where a woman was either your relative or a baby machine, or highly sexualized.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense. Because I feel like that also gives such a bad like reputation to men when it doesn't have to be like that. Like it's not like you're going to be attracted by every single woman that you see on the street, and you're going to be tempted by, seeing the wrist of a female. Like that's just not. I mean, I feel like it doesn't happen unless you have been brought up in such a restrictive religion or environment in general, where you're just like made to believe that you're supposed to. But yeah. So obviously you've talked a lot about like the struggles that female face, and I'm wondering how is the LGBTQ plus community seen in Orthodox Judaism, which I believe I already know the answer to, but do you want to just like explore that a bit?
Yeah, so interesting, because when you asked earlier if more men or women leave, I would say overall more men leave. However, there's this organization called Footsteps, which provides an amazing organization. They provide support for formerly Orthodox Jewish people that are trying to adapt to the outside world. Anyway, so they have a social space as well. And from what I've seen, there are more men that leave, but if you look at the women that leave, it's probably more LGBT than, let's say, people who identify as straight or not LGBT.
Mm-hmm.
So there isn't really room for people to be LGBT in the Hasidic community. It's taboo. It's not even. It's just some people don't even know that it exists, or they just don't talk about it. Oddly enough, but at the same time, you feel what you feel, and there are all these crushes that people develop in high school and sleepaway camp. So technically people are engaged in whether it's romantic or sexual encounters amongst the men, actually more than the women. I would say for the women it's more romantic, for the men perhaps it's more like actually sexual. But it's either you don't talk about it or you just get married and then you just do the straight life. So yeah, interestingly enough, it's not something that's acknowledged, but it exists. I mean, in every population of people, you'll have a certain percentage of people that are LGBT, and it's not even that it's completely repressed. There is stuff going on, so to speak. Maybe some people are in denial, but also when even if you're if you wouldn't have identified as LGBT, and let's say in the world out there, but when you're so segregated and all you have access to are people of your own gender, you will automatically channel some of that, whatever it is, energy or desires, into whatever is available. So I guess it's similar to the prison idea, where people just, you take what's available. So in the yeshivas, in the men's yeshivas, there's a lot of, from what I hear, there's a lot of action going down, and but some of these people claim that once they get married, that they're not, that they're just straight and they just did it because that's all that was available. And some people do admit that they're bisexual. So obviously, being what's it called, lesbian and gay is enough taboo. Obviously transgender is even more taboo, of course. So yeah, as you could imagine with any other religion, that's just one of the things that people that are also identify on the spectrum, on the LGBTQ and so on, they will have an additional obstacle, because yeah, I mean, it's set up just to do this regular traditional marriage. So you're for sure out of luck if you're forced to marry somebody that you're definitely not attracted to. So yeah, that's it's difficult for people. So a lot of people that I've seen in Footsteps, for example, are LGBT.
Yeah, I feel like that makes sense, because especially, I don't know, I feel like if in a religion that's so focused on like gender norms, if that doesn't apply to you, and that attraction just doesn't apply to you, then half of it is just gone for you. So yeah, I feel like that makes perfect sense. And what are some of the like practices that people in Orthodox Judaism do? So for example, in other religions, people go door to door to convert other people. Some religions just don't allow like things like blood transfer. So I know it's a very broad question, but if you could just mention a few.
One example I could think of is organ donation. It's prohibited. It's forbidden. It's considered a sin to mess with it's considered disrespecting the body. If you do an autopsy, it's also never allowed. And yeah, that includes organ donation. So people that do want to donate their organs, that's considered controversial. I think blood like donating blood actually is allowed As a matter of fact, one nice thing I have to say about some Hasidim during the COVID thing, some of them were donating plasma, I think. I thought that was nice, and even to strangers. So they are allowed to do that. But yeah, there are just so many things. Well, kosher restrictions, I think, are also the strictest from all other religions. I mean, as far as I'm familiar with, Islam also doesn't allow pork, but they don't have that many restrictions. And if it fits certain criteria, you could eat when you're away. Hasidic Jews, when you travel anywhere, you have to have your own food, unless it's water or fruits that are not peeled. Everything needs to have a hechsher, which means like kosher certification from a rabbi. So things are more complicated in terms of traditions. I'm sure I'll remember so many afterwards, because there are just so many things. We're not allowed to enter churches or mosques. It's considered extremely impure.
How does preaching works, if it happens at all? Like, the people go door to door, or is it more like I don't know, like they go to communities? I have no idea.
Yeah, so as mentioned before, the only Hasidus and the only sect that does this is Chabad/Lubavitch, which is, I guess, the name of the Russian shtetl they came from. They do that. They stand on the corners, and first of all, in New York City, they'll stand on the corners, and during certain holidays, they'll try to recruit people, but only Jews. They'll ask them, "Are you Jewish? Are you Jewish?" I troll them back, because that's how I am, and sometimes I tell them, "No, I'm," and I give them a mix of ethnicities and cultures that are just to throw them off, and I say no, or I mess with them, or I say I'm not sure, because even if you're Jewish, they'll right away ask if your mom is Jewish. I'm like, I think I'm a little Jewish, and then, is your mother Jewish? And I'll say, and I just take them for a ride, because if they're allowed to harass me on the street, I'm allowed to play the game back on them, just to entertain myself. Other times I just say, no, I'm not Jewish, or I answer in a different language altogether, and just I continue walking. So they're the only ones that do that, as far as I know. But they also go all over the world, and they have what's called Chabad House. So literally all over the world. The only place I did not see one was in Cuba, when I visited Cuba, I think because of limitations there. And they'll set up their little house, and it's supposed to be an enclave for Jews to come for Friday night and to eat meals. And in theory, it sounds nice, but they're a little bit annoying. Like, whenever I go, they try to find out, first of all, if you're Jewish, and then I recently had a story. Actually, I think my friend might be watching. My friend is partially Jewish, not maternally, and she is interested in the culture, and she wanted to experience a Shabbat dinner with me. When I went to visit her in Florida, her friend actually recommended a Chabad house, and we went there, and the rabbi was just extremely disrespectful, and he kept going on and on about stories about how a mother had a couple of kids, and she only had joy from the kids who married, from her sons that married Jewish wives. The rest of them didn't give her any joy, because basically their biggest fear is intermarriage. Heaven forbid if a man marries a non-Jewish woman, because then you're breaking the chain. If I marry a non-Jewish man, it's scandalous. I will be disowned for sure. However, my children are still technically Jewish. But if a man marries a non-Jewish woman, it's over. So that's their biggest fear. And there's always that agenda, the agenda to make sure everyone only marries Jews, and to make sure everyone is religious. If they could pick up on my accent, or accidentally slip out a word of Yiddish and my cover is blown, they'll really harass me, and they'll be judgmental as to, oh, why couldn't you be like us? We're not as extreme as the sect you are from, and blah, blah, blah. So they're the ones that do this. Otherwise, most Jews are not. They'll harass you if you're in their sect, if you leave, but they're not trying to bring outsiders in. Nobody tries to bring a non-Jew in. As a matter of fact, people that want to convert, it's very difficult. The process is extremely difficult. You're supposed to try to deter them from doing it, and you're supposed to tell them how difficult Judaism is, which is ironic, because they try to tell us how wonderful it is and how easy it is, and it's really like just having a map. The Torah is like, and all its rules, it's like having a map in a forest so that you don't get lost. But then when a non-Jewish person wants to convert, they're keenly aware of how difficult it is to be Jewish. So yeah, however, within the sect, they'll give you an extremely hard time if you want to leave. They'll ostracize you, excommunicate you. Often they'll take away people's kids. They'll side with the let's say if the woman wants to leave, they'll side with the husband and make sure she doesn't see her kids, or has only supervised visitation, custody, whatever. They will make your life hell. Your business might be affected. Oftentimes they'll throw your children out of school while you figure things out. It's just, there are immediate consequences if you try to leave. But it's not like they do that much to make you want to stay in a positive way. It's all very negative and cult-like, the way I see it.
Yeah, it's hard to understand why someone that hasn't been born into it would want to like join, or at least stay after, because like maybe they can lure you in with this, the map thing that you said. But I feel like once you're there, especially if you're a woman, I just can't imagine. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe there's people for that maybe need that, but I don't know. I feel like it must be quite difficult to find new people to join the religion. So my last question, which is kind of two-part question, and you did very conveniently kind of answered half of one. So thank you so much for that. I feel like you kind of read my mind. So it was, what are sort of the specific struggles that people in Orthodox Judaism face when they try to leave? And also, how can someone looking from outside help these people? Like if you have a friend or if you know of someone that is struggling to leave this religion, how can we help them? So it's a kind of two-part question.
Okay, yeah, that's a loaded question because I feel like it's a responsibility. So the challenges will be, first of all, socially, as mentioned. It's not just awkward the way the men act, but for a woman also. When you grow up and you're only allowed to talk about certain things, and your entire social circle is your cousins and your friends that are also not even different kinds of Jews, it's a very big culture shock when you suddenly leave. I remember when I left and I was freshly out and I was still navigating socially, and I took a bartending course because I wanted to try it. A friend asked me if I want to join, and I remember so at the end of the course, we went to another bar to celebrate, and I never really been to a bar to socialize, and I remember thinking, I asked, where are we going? What type of bar? And they said it's a sports bar. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have to talk about sports probably because we're in a sports bar. And I know nothing about sports because also we didn't, growing up, by the way, I still don't know anything about sports.
Same.
But
Yeah.
sure, we didn't. And I was so nervous. And there was also this guy that I liked and I wanted to impress him. But I was like, how am I going to impress him if I don't know anything about sports? And I was so anxious the whole time, and I ended up leaving early because I couldn't make conversation, and it was so awkward for me. And I'm a sociable person. That's just one story. And I remember when I went on the Birthright trip, which in a nutshell, Birthright is a trip organized by Israeli something. I don't know who exactly is behind it, but to encourage young Jewish adults to visit Israel and hopefully to relocate there. It's a nice free trip. So also there I went, it was the first co-ed trip I had ever done. I was just coming out of this little bubble, crawling out of the bubble. Because I was married, I literally had taken off my wig the second day of the trip. I still wore the wig and I took it off then. It was very monumental. But anyway, also they were going out at night and they told me they're going clubbing. And I said, what's clubbing? I knew that a club is a stick. I didn't know it's a verb. I thought that clubbing meant something with taking a stick and doing something with it. That's how naive I was. And when I was in the club, also I thought I was so modern because I wore like a very fitted leather skirt, but I was still wearing stockings and a very fitted top. But everything was covered almost to my wrist. But I felt so modern, like I was so provocative because before that, everything was 5 sizes big always because you couldn't, heaven forbid, show your figure. And I thought I looked like, oh my goodness. And then somebody came over to me in this club, and he asked me, and with his Israeli accent, because they have religious Jews there as well. It's a combination of secular and religious. are you religious? Are you religious? And I was like, excuse me, how could you tell? I thought I blended in so well, but I didn't, because obviously it's still not club attire, but I was in this bubble. So that's socially. And then scholastically, if anyone wants to go to school, the challenges, like I mentioned, I had to take a remedial class. I mean, I ended up doing very well, thank goodness, and graduated amongst the top 1%, if I'm allowed to brag for a moment.
You definitely are, yeah.
but I started from the bottom, and that's, many people struggle with that. I personally have a YouTube channel where I give advice to people trying to leave. I would say if anyone else is interested in helping out, I would say if you encounter somebody that has left the ex-Hasidic community, the first thing they probably need is connections outside of their little comfort zone, because even people that leave, many of them only hang out with other ex-Hasidim or ex-religious people, and it's not enough of a network. It keeps them in a certain confined space. Also, I traveled to 35 countries. I made an effort to really go out there and leave every single comfort zone that's possible. I'm learning my 6th language now, but most people don't do that. That's a little bit extreme. I would say if you know someone that left, see if you could offer them a job or help them with a job outside. Because for me also, I stayed, even once I left and I was an atheist and I was outspoken, I didn't know how to get out there and find a job in the non-Jewish world. I still worked for Jewish people and they were continuously harassing me, and it just wasn't a healthy environment. Socially, just be friendly, invite them to meetups, just so to branch out. I think the main idea is to branch out. And just provide a listening ear, and yeah, just show them the world out there, because people are terrified even once they leave. Like I said, they often stay on that bridge, they're afraid to get all the way to the other side, and they just stay there. Also, Footsteps is a great organization if anyone wants to donate to them. It's a not-for-profit organization. They've done amazing things. They help everyone with some scholarships with school. They very much push the education thing, which is so important. If anyone wants to reach out to me privately, perhaps I could link maybe my email address, and I could give more specific advice. What else? Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Or ask them, like, what's missing in your life? How can I be a support? Yeah, it's the challenges will be endless, and it is a lifelong transition. I've been out for nearly a decade and I'm still adapting and evolving. Another thing, there will always be a culture gap. So I'm not sure if I touched on all of this, but we weren't allowed to even listen to the radio, no movies, no TV, no reading secular books. So even to this day, and I consider myself an intellectual and I've studied a lot, but people will reference a cartoon, a basic cartoon that every 3-year-old watches, and I'll say, what, who, and they'll be like, come on, you don't know, or you haven't heard of this actor or this singer? Come on. Like, are you living under a rock? But I was living under a rock for most of my life. So there's always that culture gap, and sometimes it's embarrassing. So occasionally I just blur it out right away. I'm like, yeah, I know, but there's a reason for it. I know this sounds crazy, or like, I grew up in a bubble, I grew up in a cult, because there's that judgment, but I don't take it personally anymore, because I know certain things that other people don't know. Yeah, so that's another challenge, that it will be a lifelong transition for most people, and there will always be some sort of a gap, or where people feel that people in the outside world cannot fully relate to them, or don't understand certain ideas, or some of their struggles.
Yeah. I mean, it does make sense, because not that many people have come from such a strict religious background. So, I mean, it makes perfect sense that you would feel like lonely and lost when you are out of the world, especially if you leave. Well, I mean, I guess at any age, but I feel like everyone, when they're around like 18 to 20 something, kind of feels this void of, oh my God, the world is way too big for me. I'm, trying to find your place in the world. And if you have been brought up in such a restricted like society, then that emotion has to be like amplified so much, because you just haven't had any sort of exposure to it. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your story, Libby. I've been reading the comments and everyone is being super supportive and everyone seems to really, really love you. So that's always, it's always amazing to read. So yeah, thank you so much. And if everyone's okay with this, I'm just going to go straight to the Q&A. That's okay?
Okay, yeah, thank you. And I hope this was informative.
So one question someone asked that I'm really curious about this. With such low levels of education, how do like Jewish people or Hasidic Jews earn their livelihoods? Because obviously there can't be that many jobs that they can access. So
yeah, so they help each other. As long as you're in the system, you could if it works for you, if you happen to fit the mold, the system could work for some people. You know, it's not some people kind of, I don't know if they thrive to their fullest potential, but it works for them if they happen to like the things that it offers. And there are some good things. Okay, so for example, there's very much this thing of supporting local businesses, supporting their own businesses. So people are in sales a lot. I would say the biggest source of income, it's going to end up being sales. So whether it's a few people that made it in real estate, people that are just have store brick and mortar, is that what it's called? Just like physical stores. Now the internet is forbidden, but people do get a loophole if it's for business. They are allowed to use the internet for business. Yeah, I didn't even touch on that. Smartphones are forbidden. I barely did scratch even the surface, but technology, that's a whole talk for itself. But yeah, so people generally they have their own. Anything you need, any service, you'll have someone local doing it. Their own, because of kosher, of course, they mainly eat in they only eat in their own stores. So let's say they're mostly concentrated in areas of Brooklyn, such as Borough Park, Williamsburg. So they have tons of stores and everything from shopping. Because they dress modestly too, it's easier for them. They're allowed to go shopping in Manhattan. Some of them that consider themselves like, oh, finer taste, they buy in very expensive department stores, but they have a harder time unless they buy like traditional suits, because it's just easier if the cloths are custom made for modesty. I remember my mother knew how to sew a little bit, so sometimes we would go to Macy's and we would buy a suit and the pant then later had to be converted into a skirt. It took a little bit of extra work. So that's mostly how they function. And for a typical woman after graduating high school, there are two job options. One is to teach, any age teaching, and the other option, they don't need certification, it's just this, if you're out of high school you can teach, or working in an office. And usually this only lasts until you have a baby or maybe two, and then the man is supposed to take over and bring the livelihood. So a lot of them also, for example, there's maybe some of you heard of B&H, which is a big electronics store in Manhattan, and they employ a lot of their own people. So they do help each other when it's as much as possible.
Is there a dowry to be paid by the man or the woman? When you mentioned the arranged marriages.
Nowadays, no longer. However, if somebody is considered a special case or a difficult case, and usually it's the men that are difficult cases, a woman could always find some kind of match. The only ones that are the outliers and the age bracket on the average age bracket of getting married tend to be men. For some reason, they usually fall to the wayside because they didn't either last in yeshiva and they started working. Can you believe the irony? The fact that they were responsible and tried to get a job, that works against them because it's stigmatized. You're supposed to learn, and then even after you get married, you're supposed to learn for a year. Learning meaning in just these studies, like only learning Torah. So if somebody actually starts working, they'll have a harder time finding a match than if they do nothing and just say that they're learning. So in that case, or if somebody has a health condition and they have a hard time and nobody wants to marry them, or if they come from a second-class family, if their parents are divorced or separated, or any kind of, not prestigious or not a family with status, then they often have to pay the matchmakers. Let's say a typical amount would be $2,000 or $1,500. At least I'm thinking back in my day. if you're a difficult case, you may have to pay up to $10,000 or even $15,000 for somebody to find you a match.
I believe you have seen the Netflix thing called One of Us. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So someone was asking, what is your opinion of the cases that they followed in the show? I haven't seen it, so I'm not quite sure what it is about. But maybe you can just.
Yeah. So One of Us is a documentary following 3 people that left the community, following a little bit of their journey. One is also a woman that they wanted to take away her kids, and then 2 were men with their own struggles. One had an issue with substance abuse. So I know two out of the 3. I know the 2 men, and so I think they did a good job depicting. It was very accurate. Also, the people the producers of this of the documentary were actually not exploitative, which is often a concern, because some TV shows are just looking to milk a juicy story and they don't care about the people. I remember being impressed that they were very kind to them and they didn't just try to, like make tzimmus out of them. Tzimmus is like equivalent of mashed carrots, and I know those 2 people. I think it's pretty accurate. I would recommend watching it. Yeah, I think they did a good job with that.
Okay, thank you.
The next question is about voting. What is that process like? And they asked specifically about Donald Trump being respected in that community.
Okay. I don't even know where to start with that. The whole way politics are viewed. Okay, and this is going to take a while, I'm afraid. So, first of all, politics, when you think of political issues, what makes someone subscribe to a certain party, there is no concept of this really. I'm not even joking. Politics usually, when they think of politics growing up, politics meant rabbi, like my rabbi is better than yours. Like sports, yeah. Now here's the thing, which is also a pure contradiction. For many years, the Hasidic people, first, in terms of, I'll start like this. In terms of their values, they are conservative. I mean, they're religious. They're anti everything that other religious people are against. They're not progressive. They're not pro liberal ideas. However, they like getting the benefits that the Democrats or the liberals offer. So they ended up voting most of the years for the Democratic Party so that they could have their food stamps and their benefits and Section 8 and all of that. I don't know where people are from, but I'm assuming basic familiarity with these social services or benefits. Anyway, so they mostly would vote for the Democratic parties because that would benefit them more, and then they would sometimes, I believe there's some bribery too, and they have their politicians and used to have them at least in their pockets, and that's how it worked for them. Although they're not progressives in the left, in the liberal sense. Now things have changed. First of all, they realized that, in New York City at least, that the governor and the mayor are both liberal, and they're not working with them. They're working against them. They thought that they're not getting away with a lot of the stuff they want to get away with the whole pandemic, with them continuing to make weddings when everybody else was hunkering down and thinking they could get a pass with doing elaborate funerals and things that are just a double standard. I mean, I'm not even going into everyone's personal beliefs about how this pandemic is handled, but it didn't surprise me. There was always this, we're more special than others and we could get away with things, and there are different rules for us than for them. So this whole idea of thinking that they could do things that other people are obeying the law, it did not work out for them, because this time the mayor and the governor did not cater to them, and they were really, really pissed off about it. Aside from that, they like Donald Trump because he matches a lot of their mentality, and his personality meshes well with theirs. Some of them say, oh, he's good for the Jews. He's good for the Jews, I guess, because his daughter married a Jewish guy, and his whole, the type of person he is, like, doesn't have a filter and um, says things the way they are, keeps it simple, not too complicated in terms of how he articulates himself. It's very relatable to them, I think. And this is just my opinion. And also from what I've discussed with other people, yeah, I hope it's not too controversial, whatever, but that's my take. So now it's kind of, I think they started finally realizing that um, they don't fit well with the typical liberal. They are conservative and they happen to love Trump as well. So a lot of the people flipped this time and already in the last election. So instead of voting Democratic, they voted Republican. And I believe it's going to change also because they're disappointed in how the mayor and the governor are conducting themselves and how they're treating them by not giving them special treatment. So I think this woke them up to some degree that they were on the wrong side, basically. And again, I'm speaking for where it makes sense that they belong and where they say they belong. And someone in my family recently told me straight up, I mean, without sugarcoating it, she said, we're really conservatives, and those types of people on the left are too, that they're not um on our level of purity or whatever. They think it's very it's very radical for them, all these ideas. And she said, but the reason we voted um until now we voted for the other party was because of all the benefits, but now we're realizing that it's really not what we should do. So I think the shift was, it created a shift, all of the recent politics of the last few years. But then again, they don't know much about, if you ask them about social values, most of them won't even know what you're talking about. They don't know any of that. So
Yeah, I feel like that fits the narrative that you have been explaining before perfectly. So yeah.
I hope this explains it, because it's very difficult to explain their mentality. And yeah,
No, you did an amazing job explaining it. I, for one, didn't have any idea of what goes on in Orthodox Judaism, like at all, like zero clue. So thank you so much for sharing your experience, because that was really, really, really informative and really hopeful, obviously, to share how you got out of it. So thank you so much. Before I introduce our amazing Gayle, I just wanted to remind you that next week we are also having another RfRx session, and we're going to have Anthony Magnabosco speaking about like street epistemology and how we can become better at basically having like decent conversations with other people that doesn't involve like trying to win over an argument, but just like trying to learn from each other. So it's a bit broad, but I'm sure so many of you know who Anthony is. He has a YouTube channel. He's amazing. And I'm really, really looking forward to it, because this is something that you can definitely apply not only in like religious context, but just like general life situations where you just want to learn more about the topic, or just challenge other people's ideas, or even your own. So yeah, highly encourage you guys to join us next week. Same time, same link. So looking forward to seeing all of you there. Again, we have our YouTube channel where you can watch any of our previous sessions, and this one will also be uploaded there. If you have any questions, any feedback, you can send us an email to rfrx@recoveringfromreligion.org. We have a blog also and a podcast that you can watch. So again, all the links will be there. And now, without further ado, I'm just going to introduce everyone to Gayle.
Thank you so much. Libby, thank you for such a wonderful, informative program. And as you shared, some of the words were exotic to me and unknown and foreign, and I was tracking. And then ultimately, it's the same shit. It's the same misogyny. It's the same sexism. It's the same authoritarianism. Religion just has a way of doing that and of taking over the lives of the people. And your story, and many like you, of women trying to work their way out. And while you have been so open and so thoughtful and so kind to share with us, it can't have been an easy journey for you. And I so appreciate you coming and sharing with us and helping us to understand an experience that's so far outside of the American religious experience, of the Christian experience. And so I'm so grateful for it, and I learned so much. And I hope that you come back and see us again. And I hope our folks that our that our agents who are visiting with us tonight learn something from it too, because as we are reached, as clients reach out to us and they have a different experience than ours, we have to tap into our well of information. And you have enlightened all of us this evening with your experience, and I'm so grateful that you were with us and shared with us.
Oh, my
This
pleasure.
is Thank you. Well, thank you again. This is the time when I usually tell you a little bit about RFR, and I welcome you to join us as a volunteer. We'd love to have you with one of these sets of headsets doing exactly what Medelin is doing or Amaia is doing. There's always a place to plug in here. There are several agents online. I think that Amaia has already given us an opportunity to wave. If you are an RFR volunteer, you can do that again. If you've got your camera on, or you can give us a little chat in the comment section if you'd like to let you know that we have folks that are with us tonight that are trained agents. I also wanted to mention, I know that you give us these evening hours on the Monday nights for RfRx, but I want to plant a little seed, a little bug in your ear for February the 4th. That's a Thursday. We have been selected as the recipient of a podcast that's celebrating its 1 year in existence. And to celebrate his 1 year, Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist podcast has selected RFR to be the beneficiary of a fundraiser he's doing. There is Todd just in the comments put the link to the YouTube page and to the fundraiser. The contribution page, the donor page is already hot. It's already live. And if you'd like to get that and check that off your list, you can go ahead and make your donation. If you'd like to participate on that Thursday, that's February the 4th. It's from 7 to 10 p.m. Central. So I'll let you do your own math because I don't want to confuse you about when to attend and watch the fundraiser develop on YouTube. We'd love to have you join us for that, for a lot of celebration. And we're grateful to Ethan and his crew for recognizing us for the hard work that you volunteers do here at Recovering from Religion. And we'll hope that we can reach more folks with the donations. You know, as you know, we're a volunteer organization, so you have confidence that your dollars are put to good use with our marketing on both sides of the spectrum. On one side, to get ourselves in front of the eyes of the people who are involved in religion, where they're struggling with their doubt and they're struggling with their non-belief. And on the other side, to help us recruit more volunteers to be able to help those folks. So it's kind of a cycle. Thank you for attending. We're just about to enter the best part of the whole evening, the sharing section. I always turn my camera off, but I do listen in. So thank you. I hope you can stay. Libby, thank you again for joining us. I hope to see you back. And Amaia and Medelin, as usual, thank you for what you do to keep the RfRx going. Thanks, guys.